Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome to as well. Today, we're going to be talking about my favorite podcasts. So, if you're new here, hi, my name is Francesca. I make vlogs, hauls, routines, and everything in between. So if you like any of that, just go ahead and hit subscribe because we need more people in our family. Let's talk about podcasts. I used to be the most anti-podcast person ever. And that's crazy because I used to be a co-star on a podcast for several years. I've also been featured on one of these podcasts that we're going to talk about today. And I don't know. If it wasn't something that somebody that I knew, I didn't feel invested in it. And I feel like here recently with me traveling a lot, being in my car a lot, as well as having to work more in somewhat of a remote location, it has definitely made me listen to podcasts more. There is nothing so calming than being able to complete a task and be able to listen to something at the same time. It's just like, I don't know, my brain needs that. So let's go over this list. They are in no particular order, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about each podcast. First on my list is actually the first podcast that I first ever started listening to. So outside of any of the podcasts that I had been a part of, Ear Hustle was the first podcast that I ever listened to. And I could talk for days about Ear Hustle. If you guys know, I do have a criminal justice degree as well as psychology degree. I'm very, very, very into true crime, as you will realize as we go through this. And so Ear Hustle was actually originally a podcast that was produced and recorded from San Quentin prison, right? So it's this lady, I don't really know where Nigel came from, but this lady Nigel and Earlonne Woods, who at the time of starting this podcast was an inmate within the prison, and they tell the stories of inmates. They start to kind of expand outside of just San Quentin, and it's just beautiful, really getting that insider's look, and it really humanizes the humans that are in this terrible situation. It talks about the backstories of how people got to certain situations. Talks about kites. Talks about all this other kind of stuff. It's so good. So Ear Hustle, make sure that you check that out. The second podcast on my list of podcasts that you need to listen to is Wrongful Convictions. Again, criminal justice degree. I personally, for me, the concept of wrongful convictions are bizarre and wild to me. The fact that we can go 20 years saying that someone's guilty for a crime when most of the time we have the evidence available to us that says that they're not, it's just like, what are we doing? So this podcast goes through the crime itself, what happened, how the person got to the point of being convicted wrongfully, the whole process of appealing and entering in information for DNA and things like that. It really gets deep into the wrongful convictions, and I really enjoy it. It's really good. A lot of these cases that I care about, I honestly, if we're honest with ourselves, I have already known about. There's some of the cases that I covered in school, but the way that it's spelled out and it's told is just chef's kiss. The next podcast is Kendall Ray's podcast. Kendall Ray is a YouTuber. A lot of the kind of true crime or courtroom report type things that I watch on YouTube, some of them also have podcasts. So Kendall Ray tells true crime stories, and most of the time they're kind of like murders or mysteries, things like that. Pretty much goes over those situations, who the people are, the background of the people, the crime that was committed, how it was committed, why it was committed, and then the after effect. So I really like that. It's a pretty good mix of, it's a pretty good way of spelling out the crime. Getting away from crime for like a second. Next, I really love Everything Goes. Everything Goes is, of course, Emma Chamberlain's podcast, our queen herself. So I think for me, out of all the podcasts that I would say that I've started listening to, This one feels a lot less podcasty. It feels like I'm hanging out with Emma and she's telling me about her week or telling me about a set of events. And they do tend to correlate under like a theme. Like she was telling a stream of like series of unfortunate events that happened to her a couple of podcasts back. They all kind of push together into a theme, but it really just feels like your best friend talking. Like you're on the phone and you're just like, go off, girl. And so I like that because it's comforting. I think that's the appeal of Emma's vlogs too, because it feels like just a normal everyday person. And I really enjoy that because I feel like a lot of us creators like eat up Emma's content like crazy because goals, right? Right. Next podcast on my list is Dark History. This does have a visual podcast as well as audio. All of these podcasts that I'm listening can be found on Spotify and I believe Apple Music as well. So Dark History is Bailey Sarian's podcast. I love Bailey Sarian. Murder, Makeup, Mystery Mondays is like one of my favorite things. Like, yeah, sorry, I had to, even though she stopped knowing the theme song. But we're not talking about Murder, Mystery, Makeup. We're talking about Dark History. So Dark History, Bailey Sarian basically goes through some topics in history that we may not have discussed in our history in school. And she digs deep in it and talks about it. She's talked about the war on drugs. She talked about some companies, like a big oil company. She's really digged into like a lot of different topics. It's pretty cool. I really do encourage you to take a listen. And if you like her storytelling style, you'll really like Dark History. This next podcast is what kind of caused me to do this video. I started listening to Black Girl Nerds, and it's a podcast that basically kind of talks about pop culture, a little bit more nerdy stuff, but it's really broad, like pop culture like. And it's not just only catered towards black girls, it is very much so like, I think a very hip millennial or like a general person of color can really relate to the topics, the phrasings, the content, and it's just really good. I just discovered this today and I really, really, really fell in love with it. So be sure to check that out as well. Last but definitely not least, my absolute favorite podcast ever. I have been on 2 episodes of this podcast, the Cinderella episode as well as the Lion King episode, which I will link in the description below. All of these podcasts will be linked in the description below for Spotify because that's what I listen to because it's superior. But my last favorite podcast right now is Idle Prattle. So I haven't really gone into detail about Idle Prattle. Idle Prattle is a podcast that my best friend Eli, his fiance Chris, and our friend Abigail all do together. They really do an in-depth dive into the Disney movies. And so they started all the way at the beginning at Snow White, and they're just making their way up. It is so refreshing, and it's so amazing to relive through my childhood. Being on Cinderella and kind of talking about how that was like my first princess moment as a child, and then coming on up to Lion King and talking about the culture and the importance of Lion King to me as a black person. Like, they really dig into it. It's so good it made my camera die. It's great reliving your childhood. It's great like discovering more information about each of the Disney movies. They definitely keep it culturally up to date, checking some of these movies that need to be checked. Dumbo, I'm looking at you. It is so good. Like, I'm not even just hyping it up because it's my friend's podcast. Like, it is genuinely good. Make sure that you guys check that out. I'm linking all the podcasts that I talked about today down below, but specifically for Idle Prattle, I am linking the 2 podcasts that I am on down below as well. I think it is something that you guys need to listen to. So that's pretty much all the podcasts that I'm listening to right now. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I hope you have a good rest of your day. Give me some podcast recommendations down below as well.